So for example 3, it says in which quadrants do tan theta and sine theta have the same sign? So this should say do. Okay, do they have the same sign? So the first thing we need to realize here is tangent is sine over cosine, because we saw in our unit circle that everything's defined in terms of sine and cosine. So tangent, right, is going to be positive when sine and cosine are either both positive or both negative. Tan will be negative when they have opposite signs. Sine is going to be the y values, so it's going to have positive and negatives based on what quadrant we're in. So let's look at what's happening in the unit circle. So sine are the y values, so it's positive in quadrants 1 and 2, and it's negative in quadrants 3 and 4. So sine theta is going to be positive in quadrants 1 and 2, and sine theta is negative in quadrants 3 and 4. So now we need to see what's happening with tangent. So in tangent is positive, and tangent theta is negative. Right? So tangent's positive when sine and cosine are both positive, and that is true in quadrant 1. Tangent is also positive when sine and cosine are both negative, and that's only true in quadrant 3. Tan is negative whenever sine and cosine have the opposite side, sign, so in quadrant 2 and in quadrant 4. So now if we compare these tables, well, they're both positive in quadrant 1, and they're both negative in quadrant 4. So they have the same sign, SIGN, in quadrants 1 and quadrants 4. In 3 and 2, they don't match up, right? Sine's positive, but tangent's, in quadrant 2, sine's positive, but tangent is negative in quadrant 2, right? So they have the opposite signs. If cosine of x is square root of 2 over 2, find sine of x, cosine of negative x, and tan of x. So cosine is positive when x is positive. So cosine's positive in the first and fourth quadrant. So cosine is also the x values. So if we look here, we see, well, if cosine is square root of 2 over 2, then we're at pi over 4, or we're at 7 pi over 4. That says a 2, that should be a 4. So if cosine of x is square root of 2 over 2, then x is pi over 4 or 7 pi over 4, because we're assuming here we're just making one trip around the unit circle. Well, sine of x at those locations, sine of pi over 4 is also square root of 2 over 2 in the first quadrant. But in the fourth quadrant, sine of 7 pi over 4 is negative square root of 2 over 2. Cosine of negative x, well, that would be cosine of negative pi over 4. So if we go to our unit circle, we said earlier that if you start at 0 and travel counterclockwise, we call those positive angles. If you go clockwise, those are negative angles. So if pi over 4 is 45 degrees this way, then negative pi over 4 is 45 degrees this way. So we're actually going to get a negative square root of 2 over 2. If we say cosine of negative 7 pi over 4, well, positive pi over 4, right, meant go 315 degrees around this way. So that means I've got to go 315 degrees this way, and I'm back at pi over 4. So now it's positive square root of 2 over 2. Tangent of pi over 4, we actually don't even need the unit circle for this because we have everything we need right here. Tangent is sine over cosine. So sine of positive pi over 4 was square root of 2 over 2. Cosine of pi over 4 is also positive square root of 2 over 2 because we're in quadrant 1 there. So this is just 1. Tangent of 7 pi over 4, well, sine is negative square root of 2 over 2, but cosine in the fourth quadrant is positive square root of 2 over 2. So we get negative 1. We also saw from the previous question in quadrant 1 tangent's positive, in quadrant 4 tangent's negative.